So, I somehow managed to make an epic rated level. Hi, so this video is going to be a sort of developer commentary for the new Geometry Dash level I just uploaded, Lash. I'll be covering how I made it, my inspiration, the decisions I made, some advice I have, and a little bit of game design talk. So if that interests you, strap in. Otherwise, feel free to skip to whatever you want, there's timestamps in the description. This isn't really a level showcase, but rather a breakdown of what went into it. Let's start with some background info. Lash is a tough platformer map focused entirely on these platforms that move and launch you whenever you touch them. If you're anything like me, you probably recognize this mechanic from the level Forsaken City, and if you played that level, you probably recognize the mechanic from Forsaken City from the game Celeste. Celeste is one of my favorite platformer games ever, and for that reason, the level is super inspired by it. I'm not really recreating the game, but rather taking everything I feel it does well and using it to make my own thing. Celeste has this really great loop where you enter a really hard-looking room, fail over and over, but get a little bit better with each attempt, and when you finally make it to the end, it just feels amazing. Every room of the game is a mini challenge, and I wanted to capture that same energy with this level. While the platforms here work a lot like the ones in the first chapter of Celeste, the actual inspiration was from the special linked versions of them found in community-made mods like Strawberry Jam. These function similarly, but have two major differences. Firstly, the platform moves both ways. Instead of slowly retracting, touching it a second time will cause it to move just as quickly in the other direction. And secondly, touching one of these platforms will also activate every other platform of the same color. The reason I was so drawn to this mechanic is because you can use it in a surprising number of ways. The most basic usage is simply as a moving platform. It takes you somewhere you couldn't go before. We can also build on this by throwing in some momentum so that it launches you in the air or gives you a horizontal speed boost. This is how they're mainly used in Celeste, but we can do a lot more. Since each platform moves in two directions, we can assign multiple purposes to a single one. For example, it can help you pass a lower area and then move up to help you pass an upper one. Also, since every platform is linked together, we can add some whose sole purpose is to move another platform. And what makes this so cool is that it's essentially a key door system. So, if there's anywhere in the level where you have to collect a key in order to open up a new path, you can just make that using the platforms instead. With these things in mind, I immediately got to work on building a level that uses these platforms in as many interesting ways as possible. Much like Celeste, I'm mostly focused on the speed and momentum side of things, and even though Geometry Dash doesn't have the best physics when it comes to that kind of stuff, I tried to make it as fair and consistent as possible. Internally, every time you touch a platform, it just moves all the ones of the same color using a bunch of move triggers. The platforms also reset in between room transitions, which is why there's no smooth camera slide. That and the fact that edge triggers just make it really annoying to pull off. Oh yeah, I should probably mention that in Celeste these platforms are known as zippers, and that's why the level is called Lash, because they're zippers that whiplash you, I guess? That and the fact that it shares a name with the game Scott the Woz hates to the point that it's basically his generation retro. Alright, enough talk, let's get to the actual level. I would highly recommend playing it first because there's going to be a lot of pausing and slowing down while I go into way too much detail. So, the layout for this intro room was the first thing I made, and it's pretty rushed since I wanted to work on the more interesting rooms. But I knew going into this that I needed a safe spot to introduce the two core mechanics of the level, these dash orbs that boost you and the main platforms that I talked about earlier. You can't die in this room, and you won't be able to proceed until you've correctly utilized both of these mechanics in their simplest form. One thing Celeste taught me is that a good mechanic doesn't need any text or tutorial to be understood. If you design the early stages in a way that forces the player to interact with it, generally you'll just learn everything through that. For example, in this second room, the only option you have is to hit this platform up top, which reveals that every platform in the level is linked. Then it's done a second time, but this time it's chained to a dash orb. Also, don't backtrack to the first room, there's definitely nothing there. This room shows that platforms are only linked to their respective color. Dying here sends you all the way back to the start, and while I probably could have put a checkpoint here, I don't think it matters since this is like the really easy tutorial section. And I still want you to be a little cautious. Every room after this section has a checkpoint, so if you see people commenting, "Why are there no checkpoints?" then it's coming from someone who hasn't even left the parking lot yet. Also, this platform here is the first momentum-ish jump. So, this is where the level really begins. If you're wondering about the checkpoint design, it's because I wanted a clear indication of your progress in the level. But I didn't want to clutter the screen with any sort of interface, so I ended up just stealing the flag system from Celeste. The number shows how many rooms are left and really helps you feel like you're making significant progress. Anyways, this room is pretty similar to the last one. You'll notice I play a lot with these little screens in the background, and most of that just comes from me getting bored. I'm really not that great at decorating levels, and I probably would have uploaded this way earlier if I didn't spend so much time panicking about not being good enough. I tend to use block designs in the exact way they're intended, and while it's definitely not creative, I don't think it's bad. These platforms did take forever to design though, because I knew that going back and changing them later would be a huge pain. I got a few suggestions from friends for making the rooms look way nicer, but honestly I just felt like they added too much visual clutter for my liking. As much as I cheaped out, it means a lot to see this level get epic because it shows that gameplay and player experience is ultimately the thing people walk away caring most about. It's important to make a level look good, but it means nothing if nobody enjoys what you actually do in it. This room plays around with vertical boosts, which show up a lot in the level. There's some semi-solid spikes here, which also comes from Celeste, and I'm gonna be honest, the effect is completely faked. Here's one of the vertical rooms in this level. I know I wanted some because they generally lead to different gameplay. As this little screen indicates, there's a lot of horizontal launching going on here, and it's probably the most inconsistent thing thanks to this game's physics. Generally, I find that it works best if you don't press the jump button. It's not a huge difference, but it's what I'm most comfortable with. Anyways, this room has you reusing the same platforms and orbs multiple times, which has sort of become my signature style of level design. I just really like smaller rooms where every object has multiple purposes. Oh yeah, can you find the secret in this room? Wow, who knew? To be honest, I wanted this wall to be obvious enough to draw attention, but still kind of subtle so people think it's a secret. A lot of platformer levels tend to hide their coins inside random walls, and to that I say no. You're not going anywhere until you complete an entire extra room. I really love the coin rooms in this level because it's a perfect excuse to try all the crazy ideas that didn't fit into the main level. In this case, I really wanted to do something with a single long platform, so I did, and I'm pretty happy with it. I decided to put the coin at the very start of the room instead of the end, because it makes it super clear that this room is just for a coin, and it sends you immediately back after. The checkpoint also reactivates when you collect it. This room is another clear example of reusing the same platforms over and over again. Also, I don't know why I put Congregation there. If you land on this spot over here, you're stuck and have to restart. There was previously a way to recover, but I got a bit stubborn because I think it's cooler to do it in one go. I'd like to believe that if you get stuck here, you can immediately figure out what to do for the next attempt, but I will admit that this area could have been improved. Also, if you get launched really fast, disable the click between frames mod. Instead of giving you a single speed boost, I think it does it on every single subtick. This room is dedicated to the scale tool in the editor. If something in this level could be scaled to save objects, it was. These blank spaces in the ground, one giant object. These little yellow spikes, 5 times scaled. The rails for these platforms, you already know it. I probably didn't have to do this, but I can, so why not? The final level is about 30,000 objects, and about half of it comes from the core visuals, or lack thereof if you want to be that guy. This is the final room of part A of the level, so it's a bit on the longer side. I got a lot of requests to add those binoculars from Celeste that let you scout out a room in advance, but then I would have to make that. Plus, this level is so focused on movement and momentum that I feel like you'll learn so much better by just doing it. I'm sure binoculars would have helped a little bit, but at the same time, you're not supposed to beat each room on the first try. To me, the fun of it comes from getting better with each attempt until you finally pull it off. There were a couple of blind jumps in the level, but I mostly fixed them with camera offsets. By the way, this platform used to have an extra spike, but it just artificially raised your attempt count without feeling very fair. At first I really didn't want to get rid of it, but I realized it would just make people angry. Also, if you have hitboxes turned on, there's an awesome secret in this room. Part B of this level introduces green platforms. They're exactly the same as the other two. There really aren't that many uses for having a third color, so I mostly just use it for the key door system I mentioned earlier. There's a bit of a fake out with this block over here. It's kinda like my version of that spot in Back on Track. Welcome to the Wave Dash room. This is a mechanic that also comes from Celeste, and I love it. Now, pause. Let's talk about this jump right here, because it's probably the most inconsistent and hated jump in the entire level. I am well aware of this, but the idea of combining the dash and platform boost together was just too awesome to turn down. So I spent a lot of time tweaking this bit until it had a somewhat consistent setup, which is not waiting on this platform and hitting the orb as early as possible. I think the biggest mistake people make is just doing the same thing until they get lucky, when in reality you should pay attention to how this part actually works and identify if you're too early or late. Also, I specifically designed this room so that this jump is the only hard part, so once you pass it, the rest is basically free. I promise I would never put this at the end of an already hard room. Oh yeah, the bird here is from Celeste. If you know, you know. Here's another vertical room, and this time it goes downwards, so it felt like a good time to add some gravity changes. I really wanted to use purple dash orbs, but unfortunately since I disabled the holding effect, the game often triggers it twice by accident, resulting in no flip for some reason. This section has a lot of tight spots to land on, but in my opinion it's one of the most noticeable areas where you get better with each attempt. I like this bit down here where you have to loop around to hit the green one, then go back. But what I like even more is where the coin is hidden. Okay, I love this room so much. Like before, I made the coin visible right from the beginning of the room and made it pretty clear that it loops around. The gimmick is that you can't touch any of the blue platforms, and I think that's so fitting for an optional coin room. Admittedly, I should have made the bad platforms red, but by the time I realized it was too late. This first jump is really tricky because you have to avoid this blue platform, then turn around to hit the red. But that's exactly why it's the first jump, because it minimizes the amount of progress lost when you miss. After that, you just keep going. Really, all the blue platforms could have been spikes, but that's no fun. Also, that circle thing on the screen is a Generation Retro reference. It's a long story. Once you get the coin, there's a sort of mini puzzle of figuring out how you actually progress to the next room, but if anything, I think that's kind of awesome. And fun fact, if you re-enter this room from the right, an extra green orb will spawn in case you want to go back for the coin. I knew from the start that I wanted to use the green blocks to split this room into a bunch of mini rooms, but I only ended up doing 2. This room actually used to be a puzzle room, but I kept nerfing it because it just felt unfair and out of place. For example, you had to hit this red block on the way into the next area, which was more of an annoyance. I ended up finishing the room with this weird green orb idea, as well as another Generation Retro reference for the fun of it. I don't know why, I just really wanted a tiny room before the final area. I was thinking about Celeste's farewell chapter, and I remember that one room that just had a single cloud, so I did something kinda like that. This is the final stretch of the level, and suddenly everything becomes red, which was a pretty last minute addition since I realized I never really changed the color palette that much. These rooms are really fast paced with much less room for error, but also kinda satisfying. This red pad can be kind of tough, which is why I added that dotted line. You'll also notice that the music jumped all the way to the final part of the song, which makes this really feel like a final stretch. I knew from the very start that I wanted to use the song Milkshake, just because it really fits the energy I had in mind and is kinda sectioned up just like the level. But the vocal parts felt a little unfitting, so that got skipped over. I kicked this next room off with the dash orb thing again, but this one's a lot more consistent and I'm not sure how. I really like these quick blue platforms than the little loop you do over here. I probably could have improved the camera for this part, but deep down I knew that I kinda wanted players to accidentally jump here because it's funny. Also, there's a coin floating here because I wanted at least one that was on the main path. The original plan was to hit a block, then backtrack to the start, but backtracking just isn't fun. So I did the opposite and made it so you have to reach the end with one of the blocks in the opposite state. And I took advantage of that by making it buff this drop over here. Some playtesters actually thought that this was blocking you off, so I added some arrows to show that it's intentional. And it's not actually as tight as it looks. After that, you just do some fairly simple platforming to climb up to this part, then drop down and snag the last coin. I wanted the final room to look long and scary, so I did that. I'm really happy with how the gameplay came out here, despite the fact that in the moment I was kinda just winging it. But there's a lot of really neat parts scattered across. It's a little hard to describe with words because not even I knew what I was doing. I just wanted it to be long, somewhat readable, and always make you feel like you're making progress with each attempt. I wasn't sure how to end the level, so I just settled on going up while the music fades out and the gravity decreases. And I added some stars to make it look less empty. Then I just whipped up this final cutscene in an hour or so where this big platform just counts down and then blasts off upwards. It's not actually moving that fast, I just changed the background scroll speed. Then I made this end screen pretty quickly, and that's the whole level. For most players, their first run would probably take an hour or two, but I've played this level so many times that I can rush through it in about 5 minutes. Which is cool, because that also happens with Celeste. If you're wondering about this stat over here, it's how many platforms you triggered during the level, and it's used to calculate your final score. You start with 100,000 points, lose 1 every time you touch a platform, and gain 100 every time you pick up a coin. So if you want to go for a high score, touch as few platforms as possible. When I got playtesters for this level, I made sure that they all spanned different skill levels, and I was always with them in a call watching over their every move. And it was well worth it, because it helped me find a lot of issues that they never would have even thought to say out loud. Some parts that I thought were obvious turned out to be confusing to everyone else, and some parts that I thought were easy turned out to be really inconsistent, but I just had the muscle memory for it. Some people took forever to get the second coin, and others, Nepesta, got it in like 2 minutes. If you have the chance, always get someone to playtest your level. It makes a huge difference. Listen to all their feedback and decide what you need to fix and what's a skill issue. I know it already says it in the level, but I want to give a special thanks to Zolimano for being my sort of consultant for this level. They're very involved in the Celeste modding community and served as a great partner for just bouncing ideas off of. I also want to personally thank Voxacat, who offered to help me out when I was in the middle of having a crisis over the level looking terrible. They pitched some early ideas for things like background walls or little monitors, and helped me build up motivation to fill the entire level with them. They also designed that final platform at the end, because if you think I can make that, then you have too much faith in me. So yeah, that's Lash. It took about 3 months to make and over 100 hours in the editor. Allegedly. I say it took a while, but really I was balancing this level with schoolwork, videos, and other stuff. One week I'd be grinding this thing out, the next 2 I wouldn't even touch it. When making the layout, I would do 1 or 2 rooms a day because the gameplay for each one could take up to an hour, sometimes more. But that's because I was constantly testing, tweaking, and balancing every corner of this level to make it as enjoyable as possible. I know that one tiny thing wrong with a platformer level is enough to make a GD player absolutely livid, and honestly, I don't even blame them. Platformer levels are a huge time commitment to play, and you want to make sure players are actually having fun, especially if they're already really deep into the level. Otherwise, it's unpleasant. But if you don't like a level, before you comment about how awful of a time you had, think about the level as a whole as well as the vision the creator had, and try your best to be constructive. That being said, I felt very free making this level because I knew it was going to be a demon level. And that's great because then the community decides the difficulty. And with platformers in particular, they're usually graded harder than they actually are. Think of it like this, an insane level that's actually demon is miserable for most players, but a demon level that's actually insane leaves players walking away really happy with themselves. So when in doubt, overgrade a little bit. Anyways, thanks for watching. Hope you learned a thing or two. Big thanks to RobTop for recognizing my effort in giving this level epic, because I honestly thought it would just get a star rating. Also, real video soon, I promise. So yeah, hope you liked the level, and if you didn't, that's valid too, but only if you say that the level blows.